To talk to us about what you didn't even know you needed to maintain, which is kind of a double negative, we have John Bashar from Pantanius. He's Northeast Sales Manager of Pantanius Yacht Insurance, the world's largest insurance company with 90,000 yachts under coverage worldwide. Lifelong sailor, John brings 38 years of personal and professional inshore and offshore sailing and power yacht experience. He's stationed up in Newport Shipyard. See you up there in a couple of weeks. And he's at the epicenter of East Coast yachting, has deep experience providing insurance services for yachts and crews from 27 feet to over 200 feet. And Captain Ted Morley, MPT, currently serving as Chief Operations Officer and Academic Principal at Maritime Professional Training, whom we all know. Raised aboard a schooner in Chesapeake Bay, and made a career working on vessels ranging from super yachts to super tankers. We were just talking about that. And during his tenure at sea, he worked his way up from seaman to master. Currently holds the U.S. Coast Guard Masters, unlimited tonnage, as well as several foreign certificates, currently pursuing options for a master's degree in marine education. Let's welcome them both to talk about maintenance.
Careful now. Well, thank you, and thank you for coming. I'm going to kind of walk around a little bit rather than staying at the podium. I know you guys have been here for all day, so it's been a hard thing to stay with these seminars and all that, so I'm going to burn through things pretty quickly. As was mentioned, my background is primarily deck. So I'm a captain, I'm a deck guy, not an engineer. My father was. He was an industrial engineer by trade, and then got into yachting and shipping, designing engine rooms and all that. So he never forgave me for not being an engineer, but eventually got over it. So I want to go through a couple things. Today's theme has been all about maintenance, system maintenance, vessel maintenance, component maintenance, and all that. And there's a component there that's missing, and that's maintenance of our licensing, professional regulations, and professional standards as captains, crews, and engineers. So today, since this is an engineering-centric conversation, I'll stick to the engineering theme. Before we get into that, in case you're not familiar with who we are, MPT is a maritime training provider. It's actually the largest in the world. Last year we trained 14,263 people. So I just checked that stat this morning, actually, so it's accurate. We've got a bunch of courses for everything from deck, all that, facilities, simulators, and all that. So really, we've got a yachting-centric side, we've got a deep draft commercial side, we've got a oil and gas, also a military to mariner program. So we've got a very diverse application of training. It's a great organization to be with. It's everything from 17-year-old kids up to 77-year-old mariners who've been sailing all their life come through the doors for training. So we really have a broad range and a broad reach. We specialize in hands-on training. So we're a vocational institution, getting involved with navigational bridge simulators, engine room simulators, tech sim, liquid cargo handling, lifeboats, survival craft. So we believe in hands-on application of knowledge. So when we get into our classroom settings, yes, there's theory-based and all that, but it's also very much centered on craft skills, machine shops, and all those sorts of things. So, if you can't do it, what's the point in learning about it, right? So real quickly, we get into license maintenance. And how many in the room have a license of some sort, captain or engineer, anything like that? Okay, so a good sampling across. You all know about STCW already. It's kind of a dirty four-letter word, right? It's been around since 1978, enforced. The latest version, or the latest iteration, is actually the Manila Amendments. And the Manila Amendments are fully enforced now as of January 31. So it's something that we are really pushing for. January 1, 2017, they were put in. And now they're completely compliant across the spectrum. So basically what it means is if you're serving on board vessels, there's a lot of extra things you've got to do now than you've done before. And today's conversation, we're going to talk about refresher reval, we're going to talk about continuing maintaining your license, as well as what you have to do a little bit about that. I'm going to move fairly quickly because I know you guys are kind of behind schedule on the previous speaker, so I'm going to go quick. If I get ahead of myself, just stop and ask a question. So I'm not going to go through all the regulatory stuff because by now you guys have all learned what these various acronyms and words and letters and references all mean. Basically what it means is there's a lot more training you've got to do to comply with international standards and international laws. So we get into how to maintain your license. A lot of the questions come around refresher and revalidation training. What's the difference? What's longer? Is one better than the other? Et cetera, et cetera. Really the difference is the requirement of sea time. How much time have you spent at sea for the past 5 years? So if you guys in the room have been sailing for the past 5 years and have at least a year of sea time, that's a whole lot easier because all you've got to do then is revalidate your training, which means prove that you know what you're talking about, demonstrate the practical skills, and you can very easily get through that. If you haven't been sailing, maintaining your license gets a little harder because then you've got to go through refresher training. So refresher training is usually longer than reval. Depending on what course it is, it can actually be as long as the original course. So I encourage you, if possible, to, when you maintain your license, to also maintain your experience going to sea. Otherwise, you're stuck taking longer classes and courses. We also provide counseling. Out of those 14,263 people, I'll bet you each one was unique to themselves on what their experience was, what their background was, what kind of vessel they're working on, what license they're going to go for, and all that. So I encourage you, if you are coming up for renewal on your license, speak to a counselor and find out exactly what path you should be taking. The biggest change the industry's had so far is in the MCA small vessel. And small vessel is, don't think small recreational vessel. Under the MCA scheme, small vessel is anything under 3,000 tons. So most of the yachts out there would be considered a small vessel by the MCA. MCA, as you know, is the British Coast Guard. It's the British equivalent of our US Coast Guard. They're in charge of port state and flag state compliance, regulatory compliance, issuance of licensing, documentation, all those sorts of things. So they brought this new alternative pathway for engineers. And really, people say, well, I've been a Y4 or a Y3 or a Y2 or a Y1 for years now. Why am I all of a sudden having to get this new SV path? What's wrong with my old Y license? Well, the whole reason the MCA has done this is because they're trying to simplify the number and the levels of licensing out there. If you're licensed in the US, you know that back in the 80s, we got rid of our industry-specific licenses. They used to have an engineering oil and gas, engineering passenger vessel, engineering tow vessel, engineering yacht. All those different licenses were gotten rid of way back then by the US. The MCA is basically doing the same thing now. So through the SV certification, they're taking the existing yacht engineers and harmonizing the regulations with every other small vessel industry that they have in their flag. So you get into commercial yachts, tugs, workboats, fishing vessels, seismic survey vessels, oil and gas vessels, oceanographic research vessels. All of that fall under the SV path. So what that's done from a benefit standpoint is it's allowed the yacht engineers to actually diversify themselves, get away from yachting, have exposure to more jobs, more industry, be able to sail more, ship out more, get more jobs, and get a better cross-section of experience. So this new route, or this new process, right now, there's been a lot of discussion about this at the MCA level, the IMO, as well as here in the US, because you can imagine if you're in the system right now, if you're in that pipeline for a Y4 license or a Y3, you've already started, right? You've already spent money, you've already spent time, you've already spent effort. So the MCA is going to allow the current Y4 through Y2 yacht courses to continue until July 2021, with a caveat that you cannot start your Y4 exam, which is the lowest level, after July 2018. So between 18 and 21, if you're in the system, you can continue and get your Y, get that credential, and then when you renew it 4 or 5 years later, then you've got to go ahead and get to the SV. If you haven't started it by then, you've got to move into the SV path. So right now, we're in the final phase of finishing up the last 4 courses now in the SV system, because they are totally different than everything else that's been done before, so it's taking a little time to get that straightened out. So what routes can you take? And again, I'm going to move through them pretty quickly here. The MCA has identified 3 principal routes for our licensed engineers to either get an initial license or expand or excel in their existing one. So the MCA has an approved program through a maritime academy, much like our Kings Point, Mass Maritime, Maine Maritime, SUNY, Cal Maritime, Texas A&M, all those. It's a 4-year degree program, much like you've taken to get an industrial engineering or mechanical engineering degree. It's a degree program. Second route is an experienced seafarer route, which allows for short courses to be taken, combined with experience and on-the-job training and on-the-job skill development for experienced seafarers serving on small craft. Again, small craft are vessels under 3,000 gross tons. And then the alternative route, which is an existing route that they've kind of taken and morphed a little bit, it allows for people that have a national diploma or national certificate. So if you're a mechanical engineer by trade and you were educated at Fairleigh Dickinson University, let's say, you can take that degree and actually apply to the MCA, and they will issue you an approval for a yacht license based on your engineering degree. It's kind of a nice thing too. There are still some safety courses you got to take in firefighting and medical and other things, but it allows people with non-maritime credentials to get into the maritime industry at an engineering level. So that's a really neat kind of a shortcut, if you will, for some people. So how can you convert from a Y to a SV? If you look at the MIN 524, it actually talks about the transition path from existing Y4, Y3, and Y2s, and how to maintain your license or how to transfer it to a small vessel engineer. I encourage you, if you've not seen MIN 524 yet, you should look at it, you should go through it. Make sure you go through it with a career counselor, either one of ours or another school, but make sure they're familiar with it because it is very complicated, and if you're not familiar with it, it's going to be kind of problematic for you. So this is in a nutshell what MIN 524 talks about. And when you look at small vessel engineering officer routes, and anybody who's been a Y3 or a Y4 for a while can look at this and say, really? Okay, that's a whole lot more complicated than it was when I went for my initial one. My initial one was, I did 2 weeks of school, I did my OILS test, did my written test, and before you know it, poof, I'm an engineer. Now, each one of those bubbles represents 5 to 10 days of training you've got to take, another exam you've got to take, another course you've got to take, another demonstration of skill you've got to take. So it has gotten to be much more of a vocational level of training rather than just a professional level of training. You know, there's a lot of captains out there that talk about paper captains, and a lot of engineers talk about paper engineers, right? We've all come across them. I've had guys I've worked with that couldn't drive a boat and couldn't start an engine. When I went to work on vessels, one of the first things that we had the engineers do when a new engineer came on was, hey, get onto the engine room and start the mains. Simple test. You'd be amazed how many engineers have walked down to the engine room and look at the engines and not know anything, the first inkling of how to start that motor. That tells you a lot right there, right? So this path is designed to kind of get rid of those guys, weed all those guys out, become professional, hands-on, vocationally trained, vocationally able to people. And as we're doing that, as we're maintaining our license, we're also expanding our skill set, increasing our skill set, going through all the various courses and everything else. So if you have an existing Y3 license, which is a very common engineering license that's being maintained right now, the Y3 license on renewal is going away. And it is going to a Chief Engineer Limited license. So you say, well, okay, that's great. I go from a Y3 to a Chief Engineer. Yes, but with a caveat. The Y3s will be restricted to vessels of under 500 tons. So you take that 3,000 ton level, it drops to 500. Now, as you all know, yachts are going which way, bigger or smaller? Bigger. I mean, you take a tour through Bahia Mar, Pier 66 right now, and the yachts you look at, they're cruise ships, basically. So restrictions on your license are not the way to go. So the MCA realized that they've got to have a path that for these people that are sailing, that want to maintain their license and want to keep their tonnage level. How do they do that? They can do that either through experience on vessels of over 500 tons or through extra training and extra skill development. So when you speak to a counselor, when you speak to people that are talking about how to renew your license and how to maintain your credentials, it's very important that you know what size vessels you've been sailing on, how many days at sea you've had, KW plant, because again, there's also horsepower restrictions in place. So much like the US system, the MCA has now kind of adopted a similar scheme to where tonnage and horsepower are restrictions on your license. All right, that was about 45 minutes. I did it in like 15. So, apologize for the quickness of it, but thank you very much. John?
Boy, that was good. Got to
Any questions before John?
speed things up.
All right,
That was
it's almost
very
beer
good.
30.
Oh, yeah.
Reciprocity of license.
Yes.
South African license is an example, or British license. How does one become, are they reciprocal in it?
Okay. Under the STCW code, thank you, Kevin. The whole idea behind the 132 countries is that there's reciprocity between them, there's similarity in training, and there's similarity in requirements. Part of this SV system was actually harmonizing them between various countries. So in short answer is, yes, there is reciprocity. However, there are limitations to that based on what the initial license, initial training, and what your experience are. So you bring in that license along with also your citizenship, and that then goes into the equation. Only for MCA. There is zero between the US and other countries. And that's primarily because the US merchant license, which is what we're all issued, even on yachts, they're issued a merchant license, is also a US Naval Reserve commission. So their citizenship requirements have to be fulfilled as well. Anything else? No? Excellent. Thank you for your time.
Wow, I can feel the excitement. Woo. Yacht insurance. Is everybody fired up? Seaworthiness and safety equals sellability. The importance of yacht maintenance from an insurance perspective. We all know who I am already. Paul was nice enough to introduce me, so I'll digress and move along here. Like you said, Pantaenius is the largest yacht insurance company in the world. We have over 90,000 yachts under cover. We do have some pretty unique network of contacts worldwide and offices worldwide that help with claims 24/7. There were some unique instances which we'll get into in a few minutes, which are pretty cool, and how we helped solve some major problems. Moving along. Diligence equals the deal. Just as in any due diligence in keeping your yacht properly maintained, a good yacht broker is going to tell his clients to keep the boat properly maintained, because once they go to survey and they do a nice haul out, if the boat's not properly maintained, it could easily blow the deal. And if the boat is marginally maintained, it could also reduce the actual amount that you sell the boat for, because somebody's going to renegotiate with you, and that's going to be less money in the broker's pocket. So as a good broker, you should be encouraging at haul out, every time your clients to maintain the boat in a proper fashion and push them towards a better maintenance schedule. Also, knowing the difference between insurance policies is very important, because they're not all created equal. So on a boat like this, I think it's Katie Krogan sitting here, as a broker, do you even know if a survey is required? Most companies are going to require a 2-year, within 2-year survey. Some policies don't require a survey for vessels that are under 20 years of age. So knowing your policies could expedite the deal and get you more money in your pocket. So, port risk, if you wind up on port risk, that just means that the vessel is going to have to stay in the particular marina until the surveyor's recommendations are completed. That could also increase the cost of the deal and possibly blow the deal, and that's not good for anybody. Yacht insurance, not all yacht insurance is created equal, okay? It's not like auto or home insurance. Yacht insurance is not regulated by the state. So it's very, very different from policy to policy. With home and auto, it's pretty much the same. It's just a matter of what you pay and how much you buy. It's not so with yacht insurance. That's why they're not all are created equal. But since they're not created equal, okay, you need to take into account the terms and conditions of the yacht insurance policy, okay, and that it's not regulated by the state. Every policy is worded differently, okay, and there's nothing standard about the yacht policy. So what this will do is it causes lots of little legalese within a policy. A lot of these policies will use the same terminology, but when it comes to defining it in the fine print, it's very, very different from policy to policy. And that can mean you completely losing out and something not being covered at all when you thought it was covered. Okay. Perfect example, if you don't read the policy and what it means, agreed fixed value versus fair market value. The higher quality yacht policies, and most all of them, okay, are going to be agreed fixed value. That means they take a look at the current market. Okay, I'm going to say the boat's worth $1 million. You say it's worth $1 million. We shake a hand. It's $1 million. If the boat sinks or is a constructive total loss, you're going to get $1 million. Okay. If the policy says fair market value, don't buy the policy. You should already know this if you're a decent yacht broker, okay? We're gonna keep moving. But not all agreed fixed value is the same, okay? A lot of policies will say agreed fixed value, but at year 3, they will actually start depreciating different parts of the boat. Some of these major and actually really good policies will start depreciating parts of the boat at year 3, 5, 7, and 10, like sails and canvases at year 3, electronics at year 5 possibly, and they're all different. Machinery at year 7 and the engines at year 10. So by year 10, you're basically only insuring the boat at the value of the hull itself. Now, in the event of a total loss, you'll still get the full amount with the better policy, okay? But in the event of a partial loss, they're going to start depreciating all the parts, okay? So you want a policy that has absolutely no depreciation whatsoever, okay? And these different policies, they're not going to come out and tell you that. So you got to look, you got to read it, unfortunately. Perfect example, new parts for old. This is an actual photo taken in the Newport shipyard this year. Thank God it was not one of my boats undercover, but they hit a container in I don't know how you hit a container in Long Island Sound. Not a lot of containers floating in Long Island Sound, but this guy did. It was probably more like $1 million claim, but when it was all said and done, I didn't get the final number because it wasn't my client. But to give you an idea, another gentleman in Newport, 80-foot yacht, a 2000, the boat was 12 years old, is what I'm getting at. So it was over 10 years old, and he was with another carrier. His captain ran it aground and did $70,000 worth of damage. Okay, now keep in mind, the boat's over 10 years old. Everything's depreciated. His company only gave him $20,000. Okay, if he was with a better company that actually had no depreciation whatsoever, he would have gotten a full $70,000. So what's better, 70 or 20? So he was pretty aggravated because he thought he had agreed fixed value, and that's why he changed to us. So read the policies. It's all in the exclusions, okay? I really liked what everybody was saying earlier today and building up about maintenance and wear and tear, and because it just really kind of drives home the point. A lot of people don't read the policies and they don't know what it covers. You have to really go look for the exclusions of what it does not cover, because they'll say agreed fixed value, but, okay, no policy covers wear and tear, okay? But the big question is, does it cover the resultant damage of wear and tear, okay? So, for example, okay, somebody was talking about prop shafts earlier. If there's a wear and tear on the prop shaft, prop falls off, and the boat grounds and sinks, is it covered? A better policy is going to cover the actual sinking of the yacht, okay? But they typically will not cover the wear and tear, okay? A really bad policy will not even cover the resultant damage. So if you see verbiage like, will not cover any and all resultant damage, okay, you have to look for resultant damage. Does it cover resultant damage? Another perfect example with the guys from, Nautic Alert, I thought was pretty interesting. More and more with these tech companies coming into play, having like a high water alarm and maintenance is very important as well, because no policies cover mold, okay? So there could be wear and tear that causes the pump to fail and it fills up with water, and you think you're going to get paid out on resultant damage for mold, but mold is excluded. If you had that tech, you wouldn't have that problem. Same thing with electrolysis, okay, delamination, osmosis, okay. Most policies are not going to cover any of those wear and tear items. But if you see osmotic blisters when you pull the boat out for a survey, fix it before it totally delams, okay? Because you won't be covered, period, even if you have the most expensive policy on the planet. Latent defects are defects that people do not see. You can't see upon normal means of inspection per se. Could be like a void in metal, something like that. Most policies will not cover the latent defects, okay, but they might cover the resultant damage. A really good policy is going to cover the latent defect and any resultant damage, okay? So design defects, nobody covers design defects either. Design defect is something that is inherent in all boats, and that should be hopefully discovered early on in the process. It'll be a warranty issue with the boat. But again, do they cover resultant damage? Okay, and these words, look for them. Resultant damage, does it cover it? Fire, lightning, theft, okay? Most policies, if you get into lightning's probably the most common claim that's out there. Lightning is typically going to fry all of your electronics on a vessel, okay? Now, if your electronics are depreciated as well, that could become a very costly venture for yourself. You have to ask yourself, number one, is there a deductible? Better policies don't have a deductible for fire or lightning, okay? But a lot of policies, even considered pretty high quality policies, they'll actually hit your hull deductible first. So between your hull deductible and depreciation on electronics, a lightning claim could pay out next to nothing. So, and it's the most common claim. So what are you buying? So, as far as theft, keeping the boat locked and monitoring systems, I think are pretty self-evident. A lot of claims, insurance companies are not going to pay out if you say, oh, all my stuff was stolen off the boat and your boat was left unlocked on a mooring, in Mexico. They're kind of like, oh yeah, okay, right, yeah. Well, all my $30,000 dive gear is gone. I need new dive gear, right? Okay, sure. Keep this stuff locked, have the monitoring systems. Fraud is a problem as well. These monitoring systems are fantastic, and the tracking systems, I can't say enough about the tracking systems. Bob and I could probably, I just met Bob for the first time face to face, but we have a mutual client whose vessel, the boat itself was fine, but the tender, brand new, very expensive chase boat, was lost in the middle of the night because the tow broke. And luckily, the tracking system that was on the vessel, which probably could have been a better tracking system, but it was good enough to get the boat recovered and really reduce the cost of what it would have if the vessel had been lost. So the tracking systems are absolutely instrumental. And in a lot of cases, if the boats are going to be in the Bahamas with twin, triple, quad engines on it, it's actually going to be required. So to tell you the truth, I walked right up to Nautic Tech here, and I got a brochure. I'm really amazed by the system. I'm looking at possibly even giving discounts if we can have boats implement that type of technology, because it reduces the risk. So really, keeping up with tech is part of your maintenance program. And actually, the Palm Beach show, I saw some really cool new lightning mitigation systems, these EMP systems. If anybody knows if they work really well, let me know. I've yet to try one out, but they look like this thing right out of Tesla's lab. Sits on the top of your mast or your top of your boat, and it supposedly diverts lightning away from the vessel. I'd be interested to see how those work, but also part of a good maintenance program. Believe it or not, we're almost here at the end. Maritime law. This is the one thing that everything up to this point was maybe relatively obvious, but every time I talk about maritime law, nobody seems to really know about this. There are two implied warranties or laws of seaworthiness, which most people don't know about, okay? And insurance companies are not going to tell you about it because they can actually use it as a loophole to get out of paying a claim. So the first kind of seaworthiness warranty is the absolute implied warranty of seaworthiness. When you purchase a vessel and you decide to have it insured, you may not know it because it's implied. Nobody's going to tell you about it, but you are promising the insurer that you are going to keep the boat in a seaworthy fashion, okay? Now, in the event of a bad claim, if the insurance company, let's just say they're having a bad year, or let's just say it's a constructive total loss and the cost to repair or replace the vessel is way more than the amount of the claim, they might start looking at using this leverage of these implied warranties of seaworthiness. So what they would do is they would go through the boat and they would find something that is unseaworthy on it, and even if it had no causation to the claim, they take you to court. Okay, if they win, they hand you your money back. It's like you were never insured in the first place. Okay, so an example of this might be, and this is a hypothetical, okay, you're crossing across the ocean and you decide to pump your head out offshore and you open up a seacock and you crack the handle right off, okay, and now your boat is in an unseaworthy state. Like, I'll fix it tomorrow when I get to port. You get to port, you cook dinner, you burn the whole inside of the boat. It's a constructive total loss, okay? A less scrupulous insurance company will come through, they'll find the frozen seacock, said, even though it has nothing to do with the fire, and they'll say, if we had known about that, we would have never insured you in the first place, and they take you to court, okay? Now, a good insurance company is not gonna typically leverage that, okay? A less scrupulous one would, and a great insurance company would waive those implied warranties of seaworthiness in the first place, and there's not too many that do that. You can ask me about that later. The second is the negative implied warranty of seaworthiness. It's very similar. It says you're promising to keep the boat in a seaworthy state. If you take it out with any knowledge, let's just say you just move it from dock A to dock C and you knew about that frozen seacock, that is causation related. So they can take you to court and you could not get paid. So, you really have to keep the boat maintained. Somebody was mentioning exercising seacocks, that sort of thing, and valves. Very important to do that kind of maintenance. It could cost you the claim of the boat. And lastly, okay, we're going to talk about who is protected on your yacht. This is probably, from a financial standpoint, and the most catastrophic, because now we're talking about liability and people dying, people losing fingers. I actually have photos of people with no fingers from sticking them in electric winches, but I thought it was inappropriate to show those. Kind of even made me a little sick, and I'm pretty crazy, you know. So, but just to give you an idea, on most policies, or all policies really, family and guests of the owners, they're typically covered underneath what's called the insured, okay? Now, in a court of law, okay, a person on your boat could be classified as a longshoreman, or they could be classified underneath workers' comp, or they could be classified as a seaman. You, the insured, and the insurer have no say in that matter. This is decided in courts of law, okay? It's up to you, though, to insure yourself correctly, to protect yourself properly, because if somebody is deemed a longshoreman, okay, now they're covered under Longshoreman Act. If they're a seaman, now they're covered and they're U.S. based, now they're going to be considered a seaman underneath the Jones Act, which are highly punitive, okay? And as of recent, it used to be just cause and cure, that they take care of and cure the person of whatever was ailing them. Let's say they chop a finger off, they have to sew the finger back on. Okay, again, this leads to maintenance. This is an actual case law study that I was at a seminar a few months back. There was an older commercial boat. There was a hatch. The mechanism that held the hatch open was faulty. It had not been repaired. Not a major thing, okay? Guy puts his hand on it. Sea state was rough, boom, chopped off 3 of his fingers, okay? So now normally they just pay to put this guy's fingers back on, okay? This day and age, now they've gotten much more litigious, okay? Pain and suffering is coming into effect, loss of wages, much more punitive. There was another case, this is actually a real case, this is pretty sad. A gentleman did the Bermuda race years ago, and he had a young man on board. He was not paying the man, okay? So they sailed all the way across the pond. On the way back, it was just all friends and family type of crew. On the way back, his main captain couldn't take the boat back, so he asked this kid, he was 20, 21, 22 years old, you're a good sailor, do you want to be the primary on the way back? The kid said yes. He goes, great, I'll have a little something for you when we get back. The kid calls his parents and says, hey, I'm sailing the boat back. Great. Is the boss paying you? He said he's going to have a little something for me. Didn't even know what that was, okay? Well, the kid swept overboard, dies, okay? Because of that quote-unquote compensation, I'm going to have a little something for you, he went from being a family and guest of the owner to a seaman, okay, and got hit with the full effect of the Jones Act, and that turned out to be in the millions of dollars. So, know who's on your boat. Don't hire the local kid up the street to wash your boat, okay? Don't let your maid go and put provisions on the boat for you, because now she's a longshoreman, possibly. Okay? These are all things you have to consider. So if you're going to hire somebody to do work on your boat, hire a company, not an individual that has their own insurance. Okay? And if you're going to be doing deliveries with the boat, anybody that you're compensating in any way, pay for a little extra coverage on your P&I for 1 part-time paid crew, or maybe 2. It's not that expensive, and it'll save you in the long run. And drinks. Anybody have any questions?
Charters are considered guests of the owner, correct?
I'm sorry?
Charter clients are considered guests under the owner's policy?
Yes, correct. Yeah, so anybody that you willingly invite on the vessel, anybody that you allow to operate the vessel, okay? Now, in case of every policy, in our policy, if the vessel's under 80 feet, we don't do any vetting. We allow the client to do the vetting of who's operating the vessel. But believe it or not, this kind of guy lets his kid drive the boat, even if he's not on the boat, but he allowed it to happen. The kid is covered under the full effect of the policy.
But under a typical bareboat agreement.
Oh, in a bareboat agreement.
Technically a bareboat agreement.
Uh-huh.
In the event of an accident, and if the charter contract is entered into between the charter client and effectively the owner of the boat.
Yes.
And in the event of an incident, something happens to one of the charter guests.
Uh-huh.
How does the owner's insurance policy address that?
Well, they're P&I.
Absent charter liability.
Okay. Their P&I coverage is going to cover, I mean, there's typically going to be an upcharge for a charter, and their P&I limits would typically be higher on a charter, and the P&I is going to cover that particular guest to the full extent, and it's going to vary on what the limits are, but typically, it's going to set it up on a per person base or a per occurrence base, so for the amount of people on the boat. Does that make sense? Did I answer that?
Yeah. I know that everybody's encouraged by charter liability insurance, so the charter client is encouraged to buy charter liability insurance for that extra, so that it doesn't dilute the owner's coverage in the event of an incident.
Well, there's two types of two things that charter liability insurance is going to cover. They're going to cover the P&I side above and beyond the standard P&I policy, okay? But they're also going to cover things like loss of charter revenue and things like that. So in the event of, let's say, hull damage or a hull claim, that extra charter insurance is going to cover, up to a certain extent, the loss of charters. But they're going to have to show that they had a charter agreement. They're going to have deposits made, so on and so forth, and prove that that income was actually going to occur. Anybody other?